Welcome to Midnight Chapel. Tonight, a few of the oldest stories of the Christian faith will sit with you while the wind is still blowing and remind you that you do not have to hold the boat. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. It is quietly comforting to know who else is awake tonight. And if stories like these help you rest at night, it would mean a lot if you subscribe. There is a story told about a night on a lake a long time ago when the water would not stay still. The lake was called the Sea of Galilee, though it was not really a sea. It was a wide freshwater lake ringed by low brown hills, with small fishing villages set along its northern shore like beads on a string. The men who worked it knew it the way you know a room in your own house. They knew where the water went shallow. They knew which coves kept fish in the cold months. They knew that the hills funneled the evening wind down onto the surface without warning, and that a calm lake could turn rough in the time it takes to coil a rope. They knew all of this, and they were still afraid that night. It had been a long day. There had been crowds along the shore since morning, pressing in, asking, reaching. Jesus had spoken to them from a boat, pushed out a little way from the beach, so that the water would carry his voice, and the people would not crush him. He had told them stories about seeds, small stories about soil and birds and a farmer scattering grain with his arm. By evening, the light had gone long and gold across the water. He said something simple then, "Let us go across to the other side." So they went. They pushed the boat out into the dusk and raised the small sail and let the wind take them east, away from the villages, out into the wide, dark middle of the lake. Other boats went with them. The light drained out of the hills. The water turned the color of slate, then the color of ink. And Jesus went to the back of the boat and lay down and fell asleep. This is the part of the story that matters tonight, not the storm, the sleeping. He lay in the stern on the small raised deck where the steersman sat, with a cushion under his head. It was probably a rower's cushion, a rough sack of wool or leather, the kind kept in a fishing boat for long nights. It was not comfortable. It was not a bed. It was the one soft thing on board, and he put his head on it and he slept. He was tired, that is worth saying plainly. He had talked all day. He had stood in the sun. He had been touched and pulled at and asked for things by people who needed something from him, hour after hour until the light went. And when the work was finished, he did what tired people have always done. He found the quietest corner of the boat, and he lay down in it. There was nothing holy about the corner. It was just the back of a fishing boat, smelling of fish and wet rope and tar. And that is where he slept. Then the wind came down off the hills. It came the way it always came there, fast and cold, funneled through the gaps in the high ground east of the lake. The surface roughened, then it broke. Waves began to come over the low sides of the boat, and the water in the bottom rose past the men's ankles, and the sail strained, and the boat began to wallow instead of ride. The men in that boat were not amateurs. Several of them had fished this lake their whole lives. They knew what to do, and they did it. They took down the sail, they bailed, they put their weight where the weight needed to go. They shouted the short, useful things that men shout to each other when they are working hard in the dark. They did everything right, and it kept getting worse. There is a particular kind of fear that comes when you are doing everything you know how to do, and it is not working. It is not the fear of not knowing. It is the fear of knowing and doing and watching it fail anyway. Those men were skilled, and their skill was running out, and the water was still coming in. You may know that feeling. Many people listening tonight do. It is not the feeling of being lazy. It is the feeling of being competent and still overwhelmed. You have handled things before. You have gotten yourself through worse. And tonight the thing in front of you is not yielding to any of it, and the water is still rising, and you are still bailing. That is where those men were. And the whole time, in the back of the boat, on a cushion, Jesus was asleep. The waves were breaking over the stern. That is where he was lying. The water would have been running past him, cold, and the boat would have been pitching hard enough to lift a man off the deck. He did not wake. Whatever he had spent that day was deep enough that the storm could not reach the bottom of it. At last they could not stand it anymore. They went back and shook him awake, and the thing they said to him was not a request for a miracle. It was closer to a complaint. "Teacher," they said, "do you not care that we are going down?" That is a human sentence. It has been said in 1,000 rooms since. They did not say, "Save us." They said, "Do you not care?" The wound underneath the fear was not the water. It was the sleeping. It was the sight of him lying there peaceful while they worked and shouted and went under, and the terrible thought that came with it, which was that maybe their trouble did not register. Maybe he had not noticed. Maybe nobody was watching at all. That is the older ache. The water was only the occasion for it. He got up. He spoke to the wind and to the water the way a person speaks to a room that has gotten too loud. "Peace," the old translations say. "Be still." And the wind stopped, and the lake went flat. Not slowly. That is the detail the fishermen would have noticed first, because they knew what a lake does after a wind. A lake does not go flat when the wind stops. The swell keeps running for a long time, rolling and slapping, long after the air has gone quiet. But this one settled all at once, like a cloth laid down on a table. The boat stopped moving. The rope stopped creaking. There was water around their ankles and no sound at all. It was a peace they could feel in their arms. Something they had not thought to notice was suddenly the loudest thing in the boat. And then he asked them something gently. "Why were you so afraid?" It is easy to hear that as a correction. It is easy to hear it as a man saying, "You should have done better. You should have been stronger. You should have had more faith than that." Many people have heard it that way, and it has made them tired. But listen to where he asked it from. He asked it from inside the same boat. He had been in the water with them the whole time. He had been getting rained on and pitched around and soaked with the same lake. He was not standing on the shore commenting on their nerves. He was sitting in the bottom of a swamped boat with wet hair, asking them, quietly, why the thing that could not sink them had frightened them so much. That is not a scolding. That is a man pointing at the floor of the boat and saying, "This carried you. It carried you while you bailed. It stayed under you while you shouted. It held while I slept, and you thought no one was watching. The whole time you were certain you were going down. You were not going down. You were being carried by something you could not feel because you were busy holding on. The boat was holding. You just could not feel it from inside the fear. That is usually how grace works. You notice it late, or you do not notice it at all. There is a detail in the account that the fishermen among them would have caught immediately. The boat was already full of water when they woke him. The text is specific about that. The waves were breaking into it, and it was filling. That is not a boat in danger of taking water. That is a boat that has taken it, sitting low, sluggish, with the freeboard nearly gone. by any practical reckoning, it was already too late. A wooden fishing boat on that lake had a shallow draft and a low side, and once it was full, it did not sink dramatically. It simply stopped being a boat. It would wallow and roll and go under without ceremony, and the men in it would be in cold water at night a long way from shore. They were not being dramatic. They were reading the situation correctly. And he was asleep through all of it, through the wind, through the water, coming over the stern, through the sound of men shouting and bailing an arm's length from his head. Whatever held him was deeper than the noise of the boat going under. That is the strange center of this whole scene. He was not asleep because the situation was fine. The situation was not fine, and he was not unaware of it, and the men were not exaggerating. He was asleep inside a genuine emergency because the emergency was not the deepest fact in the boat. Something else was deeper. He was resting in that. Notice that when he got up, he did not bail. There was a boat full of water, and he did not touch it. He spoke to the wind and then, apparently, sat back down with the men in a swamped hull under a sky that had gone quiet. The water was still in the boat afterward. Nobody mentions it again. That is worth carrying. What changed was not the mess. The mess stayed. What changed was the thing that was making the mess unsurvivable, and once that stopped, the water in the bottom of the boat was just water in the bottom of a boat. Most of what frightens us at night is like that. It is not the situation itself. It is the wind on top of the situation. It is the sense that the thing is accelerating, that it is getting away from you, that whatever you do, the water is coming in faster than you can move it. Take the wind out, and the same facts become ordinary. You still have the problem. You still have the mess in the bottom of the hull. But it stops being an emergency. And a problem that is not an emergency can be handled in daylight by a person who has slept. That is what is being offered to you tonight, not the removal of the water. The wind can go quiet in you before anything outside you changes. That is not denial, and it is not pretending, and it does not require you to think differently about your circumstances. It is simply the difference between a swamped boat in a storm and a swamped boat on a still lake. Same boat, same water, entirely different night. And you are not the one who does it. Nobody in that story talked themselves into calm. They were in the middle of it, doing everything right and failing, and then something else spoke, and the lake lay down. You may stop trying to settle yourself. That has never worked anyway. There is peace available that does not come from inside you, and it arrives without being manufactured, and it can arrive tonight into a life that is still exactly as full of water as it was this morning. You are held in a boat that has already taken on more than it should. That was always the arrangement. Rest now. And here is the part that gets missed almost every time this story is told. He did not calm the storm and then go to sleep. He was asleep first. He was asleep while it was still blowing. His peace did not arrive after the conditions improved. It was already there, in the stern, under a rough cushion, in the middle of a lake going wild in the dark. That is a different promise than the one we usually reach for. We usually want the wind stopped. We lie down at night and we make a small list of what would have to change before we could really rest, and the list is always the same shape. When this is settled, when they call back, when the money comes, when the test result is in, when I know. That is a fair thing to want. It is also not what he did. What he did was sleep in the boat. He did not do it because the lake was safe. He did it because he was held. He knew something the men bailing did not know yet, which is that the water was not the deepest thing under them. Something else was underneath the water. Something older than the wind was holding the whole lake, and the boat, and the men, and him. And so he could put his head down on a rower's cushion in the dark and rest. You are allowed to do that too, tonight, exactly as things are. Nothing has been settled. The wind you came in with is probably still blowing. There is likely a thing waiting for you tomorrow that was waiting for you today, and it did not resolve itself while you were brushing your teeth. That is all true. And you can still put your head down. Not because you have solved it, not because you have talked yourself into feeling calm about it, not because you finally found the right way to think about the thing. You can put your head down because the boat is not being kept afloat by your attention to it. That is grace. It does not wait for good conditions. It does not ask you to stop the wind first. It does not ask you to be less tired than you are. It does not require you to understand what is happening, or to have handled it better, or to be the kind of person who does not get frightened on lakes at night. You do not have to earn the cushion. It is just there, in the back of the boat. Grace is like that. It is already aboard before you look for it. So let the wind do what it is doing. Let the water be loud outside the hull. You have bailed enough for one day, and the arms that have been working since morning can stop now, and the thing you were holding will not fall just because you set it down for the night. The boat is held. You are held. There is a peace under all of it that does not need the wind to stop. And you may rest. There is another story that points to the same thing. It is a small one, sometimes told about a lake and a boy who could not sleep. There is a story sometimes told about an old fisherman who worked a lake in the cold months, and about the boy who came to work with him one autumn. The boy was 15 or 16. He was somebody's nephew, sent out to learn a trade because the family had too many mouths and not enough land. He was not lazy. He was the opposite of lazy, which is its own kind of trouble. He wanted very badly to do it right. The work was simple enough to describe and hard to actually do. They went out in the late afternoon, rowed to a place the old man liked, and set the nets. Then they set the anchor and waded through the night, and hauled before dawn, and came back in with whatever the lake had given them. 2 nights out, 1 night home, then again. The waiting was the part nobody explained to him. The first night, the old man laid a folded sail in the bottom of the boat, stretched out on it, pulled his cloak over his shoulder, and went to sleep. Just like that, as if the boat were a room in his house, and the lake were a floor. The boy did not sleep at all. He sat up in the bow with his knees against his chest, and he watched the anchor rope. That was what he decided to do. The rope ran from a cleat near his feet down into black water at a slant, and it moved a little as the boat swung, and he watched it. All night, he watched it the way you watch something you believe will fail the moment you stop watching. He was cold. He did not notice how cold until morning. When the sky went gray, the old man sat up, stretched, looked at the boy, and said nothing about it. They hauled the nets. They rowed in. The boy fell asleep sitting upright against a wall on the shore, in his wet clothes, with his mouth open, and slept until the light hurt his eyes. The second night he did the same thing, and the third, and the fourth. He would try to lie down. He would get his shoulder against the wood and close his eyes and count his own breathing, and then something in him would jerk, and he would sit up and find the rope with his eyes and only then feel his chest loosen. By the end of the second week, he was not really a person anymore. He was a set of tasks with a body attached. His hands had gone clumsy. He dropped things. He tied a knot wrong and had to be shown twice, and being shown twice made him hot with shame, and the shame made him tie the next one wrong too. He started to think that he was simply not made for this work, and that the old man was being kind by not saying so. One evening, the old man watched him settle into the bow with his eyes already on the rope. The old man did not tell him to lie down. He did something better. He said, "Come here," and he handed the boy the rope. "Pull it," he said. The boy pulled. It did not move. He set his feet against the ribs of the boat and put his back into it, the way you do, and the rope came up a hand's width and stopped, and the boat itself moved instead, sliding a little against the water. "Now let go," the old man said. The boy let go. The rope went slack in his hands and then went taut again on its own, down into the dark, exactly as it had been. The boat swung and settled and stayed. The old man let that sit for a while. Then he said, "When you were pulling on it, was it holding?" The boy said yes. "And when you let go of it," the old man said, "was it holding?" The boy said yes again, more slowly. The old man nodded. Then he said the thing the boy would remember for the rest of his life, which was not clever and not beautiful, and took about 4 seconds to say. "Your watching is not what makes it hold." He said it without any weight on it. He was not making a point. He was telling the boy something about the equipment, the way you would tell someone that the oar goes in the oarlock. "The stone is down there in the mud," he said. "It is heavier than you are. It was heavier than you were when you were asleep at home in your bed 2 weeks ago, and it will be heavier than you are tomorrow. You looking at the rope adds nothing to it. It only takes something out of you." The boy said, "But what if it slips?" And the old man said, "Then I will feel the boat move and I will wake up. So will you. That is what waking up is for." Then he lay down on the folded sail and went to sleep, and the boy sat there in the dark with the rope in his hand, feeling something in his chest come apart very slowly. He did not sleep that night either, but he slept the next one. It came on him without permission, the way real sleep does. He was lying on his side watching the rope out of habit, and then he was not watching anything. And then it was gray, and the old man was moving around in the stern, and the nets were already coming up. He had slept for 6 hours in a boat on a black lake with nothing under him but water. Nothing had gone wrong. The stone had done what stones do. The boy asked him about it once more, a season later, when they were mending net on the shore. He wanted to know how the old man had learned it, whether somebody had told him, or whether he had worked it out himself over years of cold nights on the water. The old man thought about it for a while, the way he did. Then he said that his own father had been a watcher. He said his father had never slept properly in his life, not once, and that he had gone into the ground at 51 looking 70. He said his father had been a good man and a good fisherman, and had died tired for no reason at all. He said, "I decided I would not do that." And the boy asked whether it had been hard, deciding. The old man said no, deciding was easy. He said the hard part was the 200 nights after the deciding, when his hands still wanted the rope and he had to keep putting them somewhere else. He said it took a long time for his body to believe what his head knew. That is worth hearing tonight, because some of you have already understood everything in this episode and are still lying there rigid. Understanding is not the same as release, and release does not arrive on the night you understand. It comes slowly. It comes to the body, not to the argument. The old man said something else, which the boy did not appreciate for years. He said that a man who cannot let go of the rope does not actually trust the stone, and a man who does not trust the stone will eventually stop trusting the lake, and then the shore, and then everything. He said, it does not stay in one place, it spreads. He said, the opposite spreads too, which is the more hopeful half. He said that once you have let go of one rope and woken up in the morning with the boat still where you left it, something in you softens toward the rest of it. You find out you were not the one keeping the world attached. And then he said that the piece of it was not something he had built. He said it was simply what was there underneath the watching, once the watching stopped, and that it had been there the whole time he was busy not noticing it. He said, the piece was in the boat before I was. The boy remembered that sentence for 50 years. He became an old man himself on that lake, and he taught it to somebody younger, and probably said it badly, the way we all say the important things badly. But it survived. That is how these things move. Somebody sits up all night watching a rope, and then somebody tells them the truth about the stone. And 40 years later, a different person is asleep in a different boat on a different body of water without ever knowing where the permission came from. You are downstream of a great many people who let go. Every night you have ever slept well, you were resting on something somebody else worked out in the dark a long time before you. The knowledge that the stone holds is not yours. It was handed to you. And it is being handed to you again right now, in the plainest possible words. Your watching is not what makes it hold. It was never what made it hold. You may lie down in the bottom of the boat with your hands empty and let the night pass over you, and the anchor will be exactly where it is in the morning. There is peace under the water. You are held by it, unwatched. There is something in that story that is worth carrying to bed with you. Most of us are not tired because of our work. We are tired because of our watching. The work has an end. It stops when the light goes, or the shift ends, or the door closes. The watching has no end at all, and it runs all night, and it costs more than the work did. You know the rope you have been watching. It might be a person you love who is not doing well. It might be a number in an account that has been going the wrong direction. It might be a symptom, or a silence from someone who used to call, or a decision you made months ago that you have gone back over so many times the edges have worn smooth. You have been holding it up with your attention, and it is heavy. Here is the quiet thing that is true anyway. Your watching is not what makes it hold. Whatever is actually holding your life together was holding it while you slept last Tuesday. It was holding it during the hour this afternoon when you were distracted by something small and forgot to be afraid. It does not check whether you are looking. That is grace. It works in the dark, unwatched. It does not require your supervision. It does not need you at your post. It is not a thing you keep going by force of concentration, the way a child believes the ceiling stays up because he is looking at it. You can let go of the rope. It will be exactly as taught in the morning. And if something does slip in the night, you will wake up. That is what waking up is for. You do not have to stay conscious all night in order to be able to respond to a thing that has not happened. So let your hands open. Let the rope go down into the dark and do its work. The stone is heavier than you. it always was. There is a peace available to people who stop watching, and it is not a reward for good behavior, and it is not something you talk yourself into. It comes the way sleep came to that boy, without permission, from underneath, while he was not managing it. You are anchored. You did not do it, and you cannot undo it. That is enough for tonight. You may lie down in the boat now and let it swing and notice how little of the holding was ever yours. You are held. Rest. The Gospels hold a smaller moment that says the same thing, and it comes from the same afternoon on the same shore. Before the boat went out that evening, before the wind came down off the hills, Jesus had been telling the crowd stories about farming. They were very short stories. Some of them are only 2 or 3 sentences long, and people have been turning them over for 2,000 years without getting to the bottom of them. One of them is about a man who scatters seed on the ground. It goes something like this. A man scatters seed on his field. Then he goes to bed at night and gets up in the morning, and the seed sprouts and grows, and he does not know how. The earth produces of itself first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. And when the grain is ripe, he goes out with a blade, because the harvest has come. That is the whole story. There is no villain in it. There is no lesson attached to the end, and nobody is corrected. It is a story about a man sleeping while something works. To hear it properly, you have to know a little about the man in it. He was not a wealthy landowner watching from a house. He was a small farmer, which in that country meant a man with a few terraced strips of stony ground and a thin margin between one year and the next. His whole life was in that field. If it failed, there was no other field. So the scattering was not a casual act. He had saved that grain through the winter when he was hungry. He had chosen not to eat it. He had carried it out in a fold of his cloak in the early cool of the morning, and thrown it across the dirt with a wide, slow motion of his arm. And then he had covered it over, and then there was nothing left to do. That is the moment the story is interested in, the nothing left to do. Because after the scattering, the man's part is finished. He cannot make a seed open. He cannot reach down through the soil and unfold the first white thread of a root with his fingers. He cannot hurry it, and he cannot supervise it. And if he digs it up to check on it, he kills it. There is exactly one thing a farmer can do at that point in the year. He can go to bed. And that is what the story says he does. He sleeps and rises, night and day. The phrase is deliberately dull. It is the rhythm of an ordinary life, repeated without event, week after week. He sleeps, he gets up, he does the other work, he sleeps again. And the seed sprouts and grows, and he does not know how. That last clause is the one worth carrying. He does not know how. The man who owns the field, whose entire year depends on this, who has more at stake than anyone, has no idea what is happening under the surface of his own ground. He is not managing it. He is not even watching it. There is something enormous underneath that small story, and it is easy to walk past. Jesus is describing the way God works in a life, and the image he chooses is not a builder or a general or a craftsman. It is soil doing something quietly while the person responsible sleeps through it. The earth produces of itself, the old translation says, not because the farmer is worthy of a harvest, not because he understood the process, not because he stayed up nights holding the field together with the strength of his concern for it. The ground simply does what ground does, in the dark, on its own schedule, whether or not anyone approves. That is grace put into a picture a farmer could hold. There is one more thing about the seed that is worth knowing, and it comes from the ground itself. A seed does not begin by growing, it begins by breaking open. The first thing that happens under the soil is that the outer coat softens and splits. The seed takes in water and swells, and the shell that protected it all winter fails. It has to fail. Nothing can come out of an intact seed. That is a strange kind of comfort, and it is a real one. Because there is a stage in most things where what is happening looks exactly like ruin. The seed in that first week is not a seed anymore, and it is not yet a plant. If you dug it up, you would find something soft and pale and unrecognizable, and you would probably conclude that it had rotted. You would be looking at the beginning and calling it an ending. That is why the farmer's not knowing is a mercy rather than a limitation. He is spared the sight of the middle stage. He is not permitted to check, and because he is not permitted to check, he is not tempted to give up on a field that is doing exactly what a field should do. The dark is not neglect. The dark is the condition. There are things in your life right now that are in that stage. You cannot see them, and if you could see them, you would misread them. Because a thing coming apart on its way to becoming something looks identical to a thing simply coming apart. Only time distinguishes them, nothing else can. And so the instruction stays the same, and it stays gentle. Sleep and rise, night and day. Let the ground be closed over the thing. Let it be private for as long as it needs to be private. Notice that the story never once shows the farmer digging. He does not go out at night with a lamp and turn over a corner of the field to reassure himself. That would be the most natural thing in the world to do, and it would kill the crop, and the story does not even raise it as a temptation. He simply does not check. That is his whole faithfulness. Consider what it would mean to not check for one night, not to reopen the conversation in your head, not to reread the message and look for a different meaning in it, not to run the scenario again to see whether it comes out better this time. It comes out the same. It always comes out the same. The checking has never once produced information. It only disturbs the soil, and the soil is where the work is happening, and the work does not need light to happen in. So let the field stay closed tonight. There is a peace available to people who stop digging, and it is not the peace of certainty. It is a smaller and more ordinary peace. It is the peace of a man who has done his part and has gone in for the evening, because there is nothing else that can be done in the dark. He is not confident. He is finished. That is enough. You do not have to be confident to be finished, and confidence was never the price of rest, and the harvest does not wait for you to feel good about it. The stalk first, then the head, then the full grain, on its own schedule. You are held above a field you cannot see into. Let the dark do its slow work. Let the shell break where nobody is watching, the way it has to. There is peace over a closed field. Rest now. Now think about the nights in that story, because the story is mostly nights, 60 or 70 of them, between the scattering and the blade. Most of those nights, nothing visible happened. The man lay down in a small house with a dirt floor and thought about the field, the way you think about the thing you cannot control. Some nights he probably thought it had failed. Some nights the rain did not come when it should have, and he lay awake doing the arithmetic of a bad year. And underneath him, in the ground, 100,000 seeds were opening anyway. That is the part I want you to sit with tonight. His worry did not help the seed. His confidence did not help the seed either. On the good nights when he felt hopeful, and on the bad nights when he did not. The same thing was happening under the same field, at the same rate, in the dark. The growth was not connected to his emotional state at all. We do not really believe that. We behave as though our worrying is a form of participation, as though lying awake turning something over is a way of contributing to its outcome, and to stop would be a kind of abandonment of the thing we love. But nothing in the field has ever responded to that. The seed does not grow faster on the nights you lie awake. The person you are worried about is not helped by the hours you spend awake worrying about them. The decision waiting for you tomorrow does not get better because you rehearsed it in the dark at 2 in the morning for the 9th time. You have scattered what you had. That part is done. And here is the tender thing about this story. The farmer is not scolded anywhere in it. The teacher does not say, "And the wise farmer trusted, and the foolish farmer fretted." He does not divide people into good sleepers and bad ones. He just describes what actually happens, which is that the man sleeps and rises and does not know how, and the grain comes up anyway. The harvest was never dependent on his understanding. There is something restful in being that unnecessary, not unloved, not unimportant, just in this one particular way, not required. You can notice that tonight and let your shoulders come down. Consider what you scattered this year. There was something, a conversation you finally had, a kindness nobody saw, money you sent, a habit you started and half kept, an apology, a resume, a prayer you did not have words for, a choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. You threw it out across the dirt and covered it over. And you do not know how it is doing. That is not a failure of yours. That is the nature of the ground. It works under a surface, and the surface is opaque on purpose, and the not knowing is not a sign that nothing is happening. The stalk comes first, then the head, then the full grain in the head. None of those stages announces itself. There is no night when the field notifies you that the root system has reached a certain depth. It just goes on, quietly, in the cold, for weeks, while the man who planted it sleeps through every hour of it. You do not have to know how, you only have to lie down. That is the permission in the story. It is not permission to stop caring, and it is not permission to stop working when there is work. It is permission to stop working at night on a thing that only grows in the dark by itself. Your field is being tended. It is not being tended by your attention. There is a peace in that if you will let it be a peace instead of an insult. Something older than you is at work under the ground you are standing on, and it does not need instructions from you, and it does not stop when you close your eyes. The earth produces of itself. It has been doing it all night. So let the night be a growing time instead of a watching time. Let the seed be in the dark where seeds belong. You have scattered. You have covered it over. You have done the part that was actually yours to do. And you are held while it works. Sleep and rise, night and day. That is the whole instruction. There is nothing else in it, and nothing else is being asked of you. You may rest now. The field is not waiting for you. Scripture holds another picture of this, and it is one of the kindest scenes in the whole of it. There was a man named Elijah, and he had been carrying something too heavy for too long. He was a prophet, which in his time meant a man who stood alone in front of powerful people and said things they did not want to hear. He had done that for years. He had done it well, and doing it well had cost him nearly everything, and by the time we find him in this scene, he had nothing left in the tank at all. He had run out into the wilderness south of the settled country. He had gone a day's journey past the last town, out where the ground goes to rock and thin scrub, and the heat sits on you like a hand. And then he stopped and sat down under a broom tree and asked to die. That is what the text says. He asked to be taken. He said it was enough, that he had had enough, that he was no better than the people who came before him, and he did not want to go on. There is no way to soften that scene and no reason to try. It is one of the most exhausted moments in the whole library of Scripture, and it belongs to a man who had been faithful and effective and brave, not a man who had done it wrong, a man who had done it right for a long time and had emptied himself doing it. Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. Now watch what happens, because what happens next is not what anyone would write. Nothing corrects him, nothing argues with him. There is no voice explaining that he is being dramatic, no reminder of the good he has done, no list of reasons to keep going, no gentle rebuke about his lack of perspective. An angel touches him and tells him to get up and eat. And there is bread baked on hot stones, sitting there beside his head, and a jar of water. Someone had made him something to eat while he was sleeping in the dirt in the middle of nowhere. He eats, he drinks, and then the text says he lay down again. He went back to sleep. That is the part I want you to hear tonight. He was fed, and then he was allowed to sleep some more. Nobody said, "Now that you have eaten, let us talk about your attitude." Nobody said, "Up you get, there is work." He ate, and he lay back down, and the story simply lets him. He slept a second time, and a second time he was touched and told to get up and eat. Twice. Food and sleep, before a single word was said about anything that mattered. The conversation comes later. It does come, eventually, on a mountain, and it is a famous one, and it is quiet. But it does not come here. Here there is only bread and water, and permission to lie back down in the shade. That order is the whole teaching. Rest first. Whoever was tending Elijah under that tree understood something that we routinely forget about ourselves, which is that a person past a certain level of exhaustion is not having a spiritual problem. They are having a physical one, and the physical one is generating everything else. He did not need to be reasoned with. He needed a nap and a meal. And the thing that met him in the wilderness knew that, and did not make him earn the meal by feeling better first, and did not make him explain himself before the bread arrived. That is grace at its most practical. It shows up as food. There is a detail in the wilderness scene that people walk past, and it is the most tender part of it. The text says the angel touched him. Not shouted at him, not shook him, touched him. Whoever came out to that broom tree came close enough to put a hand on a sleeping man's shoulder, and that is a very particular kind of approach. You do not touch someone you have come to correct. And the words that go with the touch are almost domestic. Get up and eat. That is what you say to a member of your household. It is what a mother says. It is what somebody says who has already decided that the person in front of them is not going to be argued with tonight. There is no theology in it at all. There is bread. And then the second time, the words are slightly longer and slightly kinder still. Get up and eat, because the journey is too much for you. Because the journey is too much for you. Sit with that. It is stated as a fact, without any suggestion that it should not be so. Nobody says the journey ought to be manageable, or that a stronger man would find it manageable, or that he needs to develop the capacity to find it manageable. It is too much for you, therefore eat. That is the whole logic. The response to a load that exceeds a person is not to increase the person. It is to feed them and let them sleep and then give them a smaller portion of road. We almost never do this for ourselves. Our instinct when the journey is too much is to look for the flaw in us that makes it too much. We assume the load is standard and our capacity is deficient. We go looking for the discipline or the attitude or the trick that would make the unbearable thing bearable. And there was none of that under the tree. Nobody diagnosed Elijah. Nobody suggested he had brought this on himself, or that his exhaustion revealed something about the quality of his faith, or that a person truly resting in God would not have run into a desert asking to be taken. He was fed twice and allowed to sleep twice. That was the treatment. Notice how much of your own tiredness you have been treating as a character problem. Notice how rarely you have simply been told that the journey is too much for you and that you should eat something. Nobody is grading you tonight. The load you have been carrying is genuinely heavy. It is not heavy because you are weak. Heavy things are heavy. That is what the word means, and there is no arrangement of your inner life that makes a heavy thing light. There is only rest and food, and then a shorter distance tomorrow. And notice that after the second sleep, he does get up, and he does go on, and he goes a long way. The rest was not the end of the story. It was what made the rest of the story possible. He could not have walked that road unfed. Nobody could. So take the ordinary provision that is in front of you: a dark room, a blanket, some hours with nothing required in them. It is not much, and it is exactly what was given to the most exhausted man in the book. There is peace under a thin tree in open country. You are held out here, past the last town, where you thought nobody would look. Let your eyes close a second time. The bread will be there. Rest now. Think about what it means that this is in the book at all. Somebody preserved this. Out of everything that could have been kept about that man's life, out of the confrontations and the fire and the drama, somebody made sure we would still have the scene where he is too tired to go on and is allowed to sleep it off. It is there because people get like that. It was true then. It is true in your house tonight. There is a specific kind of tiredness that comes from carrying something well. It does not feel like laziness. It feels like being scraped out. You are still functional, mostly. You still answer messages. And underneath it, there is a flat gray place where you have stopped wanting things. If you are anywhere near that tonight, hear the order of the story. Not pull yourself together. Not count your blessings. Not other people have it worse. The first thing offered to the most burnt out man in the book was a place to lie down and something warm to eat twice without conditions. You are allowed to be this tired. That sentence is not a concession. It is not the thing you say to someone before you tell them to try harder. It is the actual shape of how the story goes, and the story is old, and it has been read by tired people for 3,000 years for exactly this reason. Nothing is being asked of you tonight, not one thing. You do not have to reframe your situation before you are allowed to sleep. You do not have to arrive at gratitude first. You do not have to find the lesson in what has been happening, or decide what you are going to do about it, or forgive anybody, or understand why. You only have to lie down under the tree. There was no roof over Elijah. There was a thin desert bush that gave a few hours of shade, and the ground, and that was the whole shelter. It was enough. Shelter does not have to be beautiful to be shelter. Your bed tonight is enough shelter. And notice, if you have any attention left to notice with, that he was found. Nobody told anyone where he was. He had run past the last town on purpose, out into open country, because he wanted to be where nobody was. And the bread still got there. That is the quiet center of this scene. Being far out, past the edge of things, past where you would want anyone to see you, did not put him outside of care. Someone came out that far with food. You are not too far out. You never were. So let the day be over now. You have been carrying it since morning, and the carrying is finished for tonight, and the thing you did not get to will still be there, and it will be handled, and it does not have to be handled by you at this hour. There is bread in the morning. That has always been how it works. Lie down a second time if you need to. The story allows it. Nobody is standing over you with a schedule, and nothing is disappointed in you, and the ground under the broom tree is holding you exactly as it held him. You are held, and there is peace here, even out this far. Rest now. There is a story told among the old teachers of the desert about a hunter who came upon something he did not expect. In the early centuries of the Christian faith, a great many people went out to live in the dry country of Egypt. They went out to the edge of the settled world, into caves and mud cells and abandoned tombs, and they stayed there for decades. They were farmers and merchants and soldiers before they went. They were not scholars. Most of them could not read. What they left behind is a collection of very short sayings, a few sentences each. Somebody asked a question, and an old man answered it, and someone remembered. This is one of the ones people have kept. A hunter was moving through the desert with his bow, and he came around a rise and saw a group of the brothers sitting together with one of the old teachers, and they were laughing. They were relaxed. Somebody had said something funny. They were sitting in the shade of a rock in the middle of the afternoon, enjoying each other's company, and the sound of it carried. The hunter was offended. That is the honest word for it. He had walked a long way into that country with an idea in his head of what these men were. He expected its silence and severity. He expected people bent over in the dust, doing something difficult. And here they were, laughing in the shade like men outside a tavern. He said so. He said, "I thought you were supposed to be serious." The old teacher did not argue with him. He looked at the bow in the hunter's hand and asked him to put an arrow to the string and draw it. The hunter drew it. "Draw it further," the old man said. The hunter drew it further. "Further still," the old man said. And the hunter said, "If I draw it any further, the bow will break." The old teacher nodded and said the thing the desert has been repeating ever since, which is that it is the same with people. If you keep them stretched past what they can hold, they break. So we let the string go slack sometimes, not because the bow does not matter, because it does. That is the whole story. It is about 400 years older than most of the buildings you have ever stood in, and it has not aged at all. Sit with the picture for a moment, because the picture is doing the work. A bow is not made to be strung. That surprises people who have never handled one. A traditional bow spends most of its life unstrung, with the string coiled in a pouch and the wood at rest in its natural curve. You string it to shoot, and then you unstring it. And if you leave it strung, the wood takes a permanent set and loses its power. The tension is the exception. The rest is the normal state. A bow left drawn does not become a stronger bow. It becomes a tired piece of wood that has forgotten its own shape. It still looks like a bow, It will still send an arrow somewhere. It just will not do what it was made to do anymore, and nothing about it will announce the loss. That happens to people quietly. You do not usually notice the day the wood takes its set. You notice much later, when something that used to be easy has become effortful, when a small request from someone you love lands on you like a demand, when you cannot enjoy an evening because part of you is still braced for something. That is not a defect of character. That is a bow that has been strung too long. And here is what the old teacher did not say, which matters as much as what he did. He did not tell the hunter that the brothers had earned their rest. He did not say, "They worked hard this morning, so they are permitted this." He did not defend the laughing at all, or justify it, or measure it against output. He explained it as maintenance, not as reward. The slack is not payment for the tension. It is part of how the thing works. Nobody praises a bow for being unstrung. Nobody accuses it of being lazy in its pouch. It is simply in the condition a bow is meant to spend most of its hours in. You are allowed to be unstrung tonight without having earned it. That is worth repeating, because almost everyone listening will have some quiet accounting running in the back of their mind about whether they did enough today to deserve to stop. The accounting is always slightly rigged against you. There is always something you could have done, and the ledger never quite balances, and so the string never quite goes slack. The ledger is not real, the bow is real. The old teachers had other ways of saying this, and one of them is even shorter. Somebody asked one of them what he should do because he could not settle. He said his thoughts were everywhere, and he could not stay in his room, and he did not know what was wrong with him. And the old man said, "Go and sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything." That is the entire answer. It has been repeated for 1600 years. The cell was a small stone or mud room, sometimes just a cave with a wall built across the front. There was almost nothing in it. A mat, a jar, a lamp. A person could cross it in 3 steps. And the advice was, stay there, and it will teach you. Not do something in it, not achieve a state in it, stay in it. The instruction is about remaining, and it assumes that the remaining is the difficult part, which anyone who has tried to lie still with an unquiet mind knows to be exactly right. The room is not the problem. Leaving the room is the problem. And there is something in that for a person lying awake, because the bed at night is a cell. It is small, and there is nothing in it, and there is nothing to do in it, and the mind treats that emptiness as an emergency and goes looking for somewhere else to be. It goes into tomorrow. It goes into last week. The old teachers would say, come back and sit down, not with force, not as a discipline you fail at. Just come back again, the way you would come back to a room you had wandered out of without meaning to. The cell teaches by being boring. That is its method. If you stay in a small room long enough, everything you have been avoiding comes and sits down with you, and then eventually it gets bored too and goes quiet. The old men knew this. It is why they told people to stay rather than to strive. You cannot outrun a thought, you can only outlast it. And the outlasting does not require effort. It requires the absence of effort, sustained, which is harder for us than effort, but costs nothing once it starts. Notice that nobody in these stories is told to try. They are told to sit, to stay, to eat, to sleep, to let the bow go slack, to lie down in the grass. The verbs are almost all verbs of stopping. That is not an accident, and it is not softness. Those men lived hard lives, and they arrived at this. The whole tradition points one direction, downward into rest. So let the room be small tonight. Let there be nothing in it. Let the thoughts come and sit and get bored and leave, and do not go with them when they go. Your cell will teach you. It is teaching you now. There is peace in a room with nothing in it. That is the oldest finding in the desert, and it cost people decades to confirm, and you may have it for free by staying where you are. You are held in a small dark room. That is enough. There is another detail in the story that gets missed. The hunter was the one holding the bow. He knew the answer before he was asked. He said it himself. If I draw it any further, it will break. He had known that his whole working life. He knew it about wood, and he knew it about the animals he tracked, and he probably knew it about the mule that carried his gear. He simply had never applied it to a human soul, because somewhere along the way he had picked up the idea that souls are the one thing that gets stronger under permanent strain. They do not. Nothing does. Consider how much of your tiredness is not the day itself, but the drawn string underneath the day, the bracing, the low hum of readiness that never quite switches off, even in the hours when nothing is required of you. You can let the string down now. Nothing gets shot at night. There is no target in the dark, and no arrow that has to leave the bow before morning. And the things that will need your strength tomorrow will be served better by wood that has gone back to its own shape overnight. That is what sleep is for. It is not a pause in the work. It is part of it. The desert teachers were quite clear about this, more clear than most of the religion that came after them. They were not soft men. They lived in caves and ate very little and prayed at hours that would break most of us. And their standing advice to anyone stretched too far was to eat something, sleep, and stop trying so hard. They knew what a broken bow looks like. They had seen people break. So there was mercy in the shade that afternoon, and there is mercy in your room right now. Not the mercy that arrives after a verdict, the ordinary kind, the kind that lets a tired thing be a tired thing without commentary. Grace lets the string go slack. That is one of its plainest forms. It does not require you to be at full draw to be loved. It does not measure you by tension. It notices what you have been holding, and it does not ask you to hold it through the night as well. You have been drawn far enough. Further would not make you better. So let your arms come down. Let the wood find its own curve again, the way it does every night for everyone, whether or not they notice it happening. You are not broken. You are unstrung, and that is different. And that is the condition you were built to rest in. You are held in the slack, not only in the draw. There is peace in the pouch. Sleep now. Consider now a different image, and let it be a slow one. There is a song in Scripture that almost everyone has heard some part of, even people who have never opened the book. It is only 6 verses long. It was written by a man who had been a shepherd before he was anything else, and it has been carried by frightened people for about 3,000 years. Tonight, let us not recite it. Let us walk through it. It opens with a claim about ownership, which sounds cold in our language and was warm in his. The Lord is my shepherd. In that world, a shepherd was not a symbol. He was a specific man who slept outside with animals, and whose whole reputation rested on how many of them were alive in the spring. The sheep did not belong to themselves. That was the good news in it. An animal that belongs to no one in that country does not last a week. It has no one to find water for it. It has no one who knows where the good ground is in a dry year, no one who counts it at dusk. no one who notices when it is missing. Belonging to someone was not a limitation, it was survival. And then the line most people know, I shall not want, which does not mean I will never desire anything. It means, in the older sense, I will not be in want. I will not be found lacking. There will be enough. The next line is the one for tonight. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Notice the verb. It is not, he permits me to lie down. It is not, he suggests that I might consider lying down when my work is finished. He makes me lie down. There is an insistence in it, and the insistence is gentle, and it is aimed at an animal that would not otherwise stop. Sheep do not lie down easily. That is a real fact about them. A shepherd who has been at it a while will tell you that a sheep will not lie down if it is hungry, or thirsty, or frightened of something in the tree line, or bothered by insects, or unsettled by conflict inside the flock. All four conditions have to be right at once. Any one of them will keep the animal on its feet, grazing anxiously, refusing the ground. So making a sheep lie down is not a small thing, it is the whole job. The shepherd has to have found grass good enough that the animal is full. He has to have found water. He has to be standing where the animal can see him. So the tree line is not a threat. He has to have settled whatever tension was running through the flock that morning. And when all of that is true, the sheep lies down, not before. Which means that a lying down sheep is a report card on the shepherd. The rest is evidence. It is not the animal being obedient or spiritually advanced. It is the animal being taken care of well enough that its body finally lets go. Your rest is not your achievement. It never was. Then the water. He leads me beside still waters, the old translation says, and the Hebrew underneath is closer to waters of rest or waters of quietness. There is a reason it says still. Sheep are afraid of moving water. Their wool takes on weight and they know it, and a running stream is a real danger to them. A shepherd who wants his flock to drink will find a pool, or he will dam a little channel with stones until a quiet place forms at the edge of the current. He makes a still place inside a moving thing. That is the picture. The stream keeps running. Nobody stops the river. The peace is made at the edge of it. The shepherd simply builds a small, quiet edge where a frightened animal can put its face down in the water without being taken by it. That is what tonight can be. The stream is still running. Whatever is moving in your life is still moving. The current did not stop because it got dark, and there is a quiet edge available anyway, made by someone else, out of stones, on purpose, for creatures who cannot drink from fast water. You are being led to it. That is the whole verb of the psalm. He leads, he makes, he restores, he prepares. Every active word in that song belongs to the shepherd, and almost nothing belongs to the sheep. The sheep lies down and drinks and walks, and is followed by goodness and mercy. The sheep does not do very much. That is not an insult to sheep. There is one more line in that song, and it is the one shepherds recognize fastest. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Those are two different tools, and most people hear them as one. The rod was a short, heavy club. The staff was the long crook, the one everyone pictures, with the curve at the end. The rod was for what was out there. The staff was for the sheep. A shepherd used the crook to move an animal without frightening it. He would hook it around a leg, or lay the long end against the flank and steer. It was a way of touching a nervous creature from a distance. Sheep are calmed by being touched. That is the thing. An animal that cannot see well and cannot reason at all can still feel a staff resting against its side, and that contact tells it something no argument could. It tells it where the shepherd is. It tells it that it has not drifted. The comfort is not in the information, it is in the contact. And that is worth carrying tonight, because most of us have been trying to be comforted by information. We look for the reassuring fact, the piece of news that would settle it, the thing somebody could say that would make the situation acceptable. There is usually no such fact. There rarely is. What there is instead is the older and simpler comfort of not being alone in the field. The sense, however faint, of something resting against your side in the dark. You are not required to understand it, and understanding was never what calmed the animal. Notice how little the sheep is asked to do in that whole song. It lies down, it drinks, it walks through a valley, it eats at a table, it is followed. Every strong verb belongs to somebody else, and the sheep's entire contribution is to remain in the flock and let itself be led. That is not a low calling, that is rest. And notice that the shepherd is described as being with the sheep in the valley, not waiting at the far end of it. He does not send the flock through and meet them on the other side. He walks it, in the dark, at their pace, with them. The company is the whole answer. It was in the boat too. So let something rest against your side tonight. Let there be contact rather than explanation. You do not have to be told why. You have to be held, and you are. There is peace in the middle of the flock. Nothing is asked of you there. The grass is good. The water is quiet. Somebody has been up ahead of you all evening making sure of it, and the checking is finished, and the field is safe enough for a body to lie down in. You are held in the pasture. Let your legs fold. Rest now. And then the valley, which comes later, and which we will only touch tonight, because it is dark, and we are not going to walk that part of the road at this hour. The line about it is short, and it is worth carrying to sleep. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Not for the valley is short, not for nothing bad will happen, not for I have prepared adequately. The whole answer to the dark part of the road is one fact about company. You are with me. That is the entire consolation offered. It is the same consolation that was in the boat. Jesus did not promise the men a lake without wind. He was in the boat with them, and the boat held, and that turned out to be the thing that mattered. So tonight, let it be enough that you are not alone in the room. You do not have to feel it. Feeling is not the test. The sheep in the green grass is not having an experience of the shepherd. It is just eating, and the shepherd is there, whether or not the animal is thinking about him. You are held that way right now without needing to notice it. Let your body do what the flock does when everything has been taken care of. Let the legs fold. Let the ground take the weight. There is grass under you, and there is quiet water nearby, and someone else has already gone ahead and checked the tree line. Nothing is required of you. There is peace at the edge of the stream. Lie down. He makes you lie down, and it is kindness, and you may rest. There is another story that points to the same thing, and this one has almost nothing in it. There is a story sometimes told about a house on a hill above a lake, and a lamp that was left in the window every night for 11 years. The house belonged to a woman whose son had gone to sea. He had gone the way young men went in those days, which is to say he had signed onto a boat in a harbor 2 days' walk from home and sent word back with a carter, and that was the last anyone had heard. She lit a lamp in the front window the night she got the news. Then she lit it again the next night. It became the last thing she did before bed. She would trim the wick and fill the small clay dish with oil and set it on the sill in the front room where the window faced down the slope toward the water, and then she would go to sleep in the back of the house. She did not sit up with it. That is the part of the story that matters. For the first year she did sit up. She sat in a chair by the window with a blanket over her knees and watched the road and the strip of water at the bottom of it. And she did that until she was ill from doing it, and a neighbor came and made her stop. After that, she lit the lamp and went to bed. People in the village had opinions about this, as people do. Some of them thought it was a beautiful thing. Some of them thought it was a sad thing that she should have let go of years ago. One or two of them thought it was a waste of good oil, and they were not wrong about the oil, because oil was not cheap and she was not wealthy. She kept doing it anyway, every night for 11 years. Now here is the thing about a lamp in a window. It does not work harder when you watch it. That is the whole of what it has to teach, and it takes about a second to understand and a lifetime to actually believe. The flame does not know whether anyone is in the room. It burns the same at midnight with the woman asleep down the hall as it did in the first year, with her sitting up beside it, red-eyed, holding the arms of the chair. Its light goes out the same distance, down the same slope, toward the same water. The oil is consumed at the same rate. Her watching added nothing to the light. What her watching added was to her. It took the years off her. It aged her hands and hollowed her face and made her sharp with people she loved, and it did not put one additional inch of brightness onto that hillside. People asked her about it sometimes, in the later years when she was old. They asked in the careful way people ask about a grief that has gone on a long time. They wanted to know whether she still believed he was coming, whether the lamp meant she had not accepted it. She said something that surprised most of them. She said the lamp had stopped being about him some years ago. She said she had noticed one winter that she was lighting it for the hillside now, for whoever was out on that road in the dark, for the carters and the shepherds and the men coming up late from the harbor. She said, somebody should have a light on. That is a quiet turn in a life, and it is worth noticing. The vigil had become a service. The thing she started out of fear had, over 11 years, become something she did for other people, and she had not decided to change it. It changed on its own, under her, in the dark. That happens more than we expect. A thing you began in pain becomes, without any effort on your part, a thing that holds somebody else up. You do not usually notice it happening. You notice afterward, if at all. Grace does that to what we start badly. It does not require our motives to be clean at the beginning. It takes the anxious thing, the compulsive thing, the thing we did because we could not stop, and it slowly turns it into something with warmth in it. She did not fix her grief. Her grief became a lamp. And she slept through most of that transformation, which is the part that belongs to this episode. 11 years of nights in the back room. The work was done in the front of the house, while she was unconscious in the back of it. Nobody supervised the change. It simply occurred. Notice how much of what is best about you arrived that way, not by decision, not by discipline. It came in slowly over years in a life you were mostly just getting through, and one day you noticed it was there. You were held while that happened. You did not feel it. So there is no reason to think tonight is different. Something is being made out of what you are carrying, and it is being made at a speed you cannot perceive. and your job in it is smaller than you think. Light the lamp. Go to the back of the house. Lie down. There is peace in an unwatched flame, and there is peace in a life that is being changed without your supervision. Both of those are happening right now. You are held in the back room. Rest. The neighbor who came and made her stop understood something. She did not tell the woman to put out the lamp. That is worth noticing carefully, because it would have been the easier advice, and it is the advice most people give. Let him go. Move on. Take the lamp out of the window and get on with your life. She did not say that. She said, light it and then go to bed, which is a completely different thing. It keeps the hope and removes the vigil. It says, the thing you are doing is good, and you do not have to bleed for it, and the lamp will do its own job in an empty room. That is a very old distinction, and most of us have never been taught it. There is love, and there is the anxious watching we do, because we have confused the watching with the love. They feel like the same substance from the inside. They are not. One of them can be done while asleep. The other one cannot be done at all, really. It can only be endured. You can love someone from inside a sleeping body. You can love a child who is far away and out of contact and be asleep at 3 a.m, and the love does not lapse during those hours. It does not thin out. It is not suspended pending your return to consciousness. Nothing about it is being maintained by your attention. The lamp burns in the empty room. Whatever you have lit for somebody, it is still lit right now. The care you have for the person you are worried about is not a candle you are holding up with your arm. It is not going to fall if you sleep. It is set on a sill, and it is steady, and it will be there in the morning. And there is grace in that arrangement, if you will notice it, because you were never able to keep anyone safe by staying awake. That is the hard fact under this whole episode, and it is worth saying plainly in the dark, where hard things are easier to hear. Not one person has ever been protected by another person's insomnia. Your sleep does not withdraw your care. Your sleeplessness does not add to it. So the woman slept for 11 years in the back of a small house, while a light burned in the front room for a young man who might have been anywhere, and people who came up the hill road at night could see it from a long way off, and some of them said it was the only light on that whole slope. Whether he ever came back is not really the point of the story. Some versions say he did. Some versions leave it open, and the open ones are probably older and probably better, because the story is not about the ending. It is about a woman who found out that she could keep a light and still lie down. That is available to you tonight, exactly as things are. You may set down the vigil and keep the love. You may light whatever you light and say whatever you say, and then walk to the back of the house and get under the blanket and let the flame do what flames do without supervision. Nothing goes dark because you slept. The window is facing the water. The light is going out down the slope. It has been doing that for hours already tonight while you were busy with other things, and it will keep doing it, and you are not the fuel. There is peace in an unattended lamp. There always was. You are held in the back room as much as in the front one. Let your eyes close. The light is not yours to hold up. Rest now. This brings us to something else the old teachers used to say, and this one comes from a kitchen. There was once a man in France, about 350 years ago, who spent most of his adult life washing dishes. He had been a soldier when he was young. He was wounded in a war nobody remembers now, and the wound left him with a leg that hurt him for the rest of his days, and it ended whatever plans he had. Then he was a servant in a household, and by his own account he was clumsy at it and broke things. Eventually, he joined a religious community and they put him in the kitchen. He was not the head of anything. He was not a scholar. He had no position and no title, and by every measure the world uses, he had a small life, and he did the same work every day for something like 30 years. He cooked for a house full of men. He scrubbed pots. He went to the market. He peeled things. And people started coming to see him. That is the strange part of the story. Over the years, men and women who had spent their whole lives studying began to travel to that kitchen to talk to the man doing the dishes, because something about him was unmistakable when you were in a room with him, and nobody could quite say what it was. He was not doing anything visible. He was just at peace in a way that did not fit his circumstances. Somebody eventually wrote down what he said in a handful of conversations and a few short letters, and that little collection has stayed in print ever since. It is one of the very few books that Christians of every kind have loved without arguing about it. What he said was extremely simple and slightly disappointing at first hearing. He said that he had stopped trying to have a special time set aside for God because he had found that God was equally available while he was turning an omelet. He said the noise of the kitchen did not interfere. He said he could be as close to what mattered while picking up a straw from the floor as he could, kneeling somewhere quiet. Then he said the thing that is worth carrying into the dark tonight. He said that when he had failed, and he failed often, he did not spend time on it. He simply noticed it, said something short and honest, and went on with what he was doing. He said that dwelling on it was itself a kind of self-regard, and that it made the trouble bigger rather than smaller. He got up. That was his whole method. He got up quickly and kept going. There is a version of the religious life that is exhausting, and most people who have tried it know exactly what it feels like. It runs on review. You go over the day. You go over the conversation. You inspect your own motives for the good things you did and find them mixed, and then you inspect the inspection. None of that is in this man's kitchen. He did not conduct an evening audit of himself. He was too busy with pots, and he had decided that the pots were not an obstacle to anything, and that decision took the whole weight of it off his back. And so he was light. That is what people noticed when they came. Somebody asked him once how a person begins. It is the obvious question, and he was asked it often, and his answer was almost annoyingly plain. He said, "Begin." He said there is no method to learn and no preparation, and that people wait for a readiness that does not come. He said, the waiting is the only obstacle. Then he said something more useful. He said that at the start he had found it difficult and had failed constantly, and that he had spent years feeling that he was getting nowhere at all. Years, he said so plainly, without softening it. And then he said that at some point, without his noticing when, it had stopped being difficult. He could not identify the day. He could not describe what changed. He simply found himself somewhere he had been trying to get to for a decade, and he had arrived while doing dishes. He did not build it. It settled on him. That is a very different picture of the inner life than most people carry. We tend to imagine it as construction. You do the practices and something is built, and if nothing has been built, you have not done enough practices. He described it as weather, something that came. His whole part was to keep turning up in the kitchen, to keep coming back after wandering off. to not make a project out of the wandering off. Everything else, in his account, happened to him rather than by him. That takes an enormous weight off a person at midnight. Because if the thing you want is built, then a night like this one, where you feel nothing and are simply tired, is a night of no progress. And if it settles instead, then a night like this one is exactly as good as any other, and better than most, because you are not in the way. You are not behind. There is no schedule. Notice that he spent 30 years in one room doing repetitive manual work, and that this is usually described as a limitation, and was in fact the whole method. Repetition without ambition. The same pots, the same floor, the same hours. Nothing dramatic ever happened to him. That was the point. And a great many people came a long way to sit in a kitchen with a man who had nothing to show them, because what he had could not be shown, only sat near, and they went home changed anyway. You are near it right now. That is all that is required. There is peace among ordinary things. There is peace in a bed at midnight in a house where nothing is happening. It is the same peace that was in that kitchen, and it does not need an occasion, and it has never once asked whether you had a productive day. You are held here doing nothing, and doing nothing is enough. Rest now. Consider what his days were actually like, because it is easy to romanticize a kitchen from a distance. It was hot. There was no running water. He was on a bad leg for 10 or 12 hours at a stretch on a stone floor. He went out in the winter with a cart to buy wine and food for the house, and he mentions in one place that this errand made him anxious because he was clumsy and things went wrong. He did not enjoy it. He said so plainly. He simply stopped requiring it to be enjoyable. There is a particular kind of freedom in that, and it is not resignation. Resignation is grim. This was not grim. Everyone who met him said the opposite. He was cheerful in a way that people found almost irritating until they had been around it for a while. What he had was the removal of a second job. Most of us are working 2 jobs at all times. There is the thing we are doing, and then there is the running commentary about whether we are doing it well, whether we should be doing something else, whether it counts, whether we are behind. The second job is invisible, and it is heavier than the first one. He had put the second one down. He was washing a pot, and that was the entire content of the moment, and there was no committee inside his head grading the pot washing. When his attention wandered, and he said it wandered constantly, he brought it back without ceremony and without commentary and kept washing. And he did that for 30 years, and it made him into something people traveled to see. Near the end of his life, he was in a good deal of pain, and the account we have of his last weeks is very plain. He was not afraid. He said he was not troubled by the thought of what came next. He had spent 3 decades practicing the presence of something he did not have to earn in a room full of dirty dishes, and it turned out that this had been sufficient preparation for everything. Now bring that into your room tonight. The second job is what keeps most people awake, not the day, the commentary about the day, the replay with corrections, the quiet, ongoing evaluation of whether you are managing your life at an acceptable standard. You may put that down now, the way he put it down among the pots. Notice how much of what is running through you at this hour is not information. It is not new. It is not going to produce a decision. It is review, and review at night has never once improved anything. And the man in the kitchen figured that out and lived 30 years lighter because of it. When something surfaced, he did not argue with it. He got up and kept going. you can do the same thing lying down. If a thought arrives about something you got wrong today, you do not have to hold court over it. You can let it be true and small and finished, and let the next breath happen without a verdict attached. That is grace working at the smallest possible scale. It does not require an occasion. It does not need you to be in a chapel or a quiet place or the right frame of mind. It was available to him beside a sink with his bad leg aching and a pile of copper pots waiting. And it is available to you in a dark room with an alarm set for the morning. Nothing has to be resolved for it to be present. He would have said that this hour is not a lesser hour, that the ordinary dark of a bedroom at midnight is as full of what matters as any place anyone has ever gone looking for it, that you are not off duty from something, and not waiting for something, and not behind. You are simply here. Here is enough. Here is held. So let the pots be washed. Let the day be over without a review. Let your attention go wherever attention goes when it stops being supervised. There is peace in the kitchen. It was there before he arrived. He was held among the pots. You may rest now, and you do not have to do it well. There is another story that points to the same thing, and it was told outdoors on a hillside to people who did not have much. Jesus was speaking to a crowd that was mostly poor, that is worth holding on to, because it changes the whole tone of what he said next. These were not people with savings. Most of them worked with their hands and were paid at the end of each day. And if they did not work, they did not eat that week, and they knew families who had gone under. They had every practical reason to be anxious about food and clothing, because food and clothing were genuinely uncertain for them. He did not tell them that their worry was unreasonable. He told them to look at birds. Look at the birds of the air, he said. They do not plant, they do not harvest, they do not gather into barns, and your Father feeds them. Then he said, are you not worth more than they are? The question is not a trap. He answers it himself in the next breath, the way he usually does. It is not a test of the crowd's theology. It is a man pointing at the sky and asking people who are frightened to look at something ordinary that has been true their whole lives. There were birds over that hillside while he was saying it. That is the point. They were there in the air the entire time the crowd had been standing in the sun listening to him, doing what birds do, which is nothing that looks like planning. No bird on that hill had a granary. Not one of them was managing next winter, and they were all visibly alive. They were not being careless. They were being fed. They were held without knowing the word for it. That distinction matters because people misread this passage constantly. He is not praising thoughtlessness. Birds work extremely hard. A bird spends most of its waking life looking for food, and the looking is exhausting, and many of them do not make it through a hard year. What birds do not do is store against the future. They cannot. There is no mechanism in them for it. A bird's whole economy is today's food, found today, eaten today, and then night, and then the same again. It has no way to be anxious about March, because it has no way to prepare for March. And the world has fed birds for as long as there have been birds. Then he went from the sky to the ground and pointed at flowers. Consider the lilies of the field, he said, how they grow. They do not labor or spin, and yet even the greatest king in all our history, in all his glory, was not dressed like one of these. The flowers he was pointing at were probably not lilies as we picture them. Most likely they were the small wild anemones that go up all over those hills in the spring red and purple in the thin grass between the rocks. They come up everywhere in enormous numbers for a few weeks. And they are extravagant. That is the word for it. Nobody planted them. Nobody was going to sell them. They grow on hillsides that no person walks across in a given year, and they are perfect anyway. And then the sun comes and the grass dries, and by summer they are gone and used for kindling. They were not made beautiful because someone was watching. That is a hard thing for us to take in, because we are so thoroughly trained to think of value as something conferred by observation. The flower is not performing. It has no audience and no strategy and no future, and it is dressed better than a king. There is one more thing about the birds that the crowd on that hillside would have known, and we do not. Birds sleep, and they sleep in the open. There is no shelter in it. A small bird on a branch in a winter night is exposed to everything, and it has no plan, and it cannot know whether it will find food in the morning. It puts its head under its wing and it stops. And the extraordinary thing is that it goes fully under. A bird's rest is deep. Its temperature drops. Its heart slows. It surrenders more completely than we do, in far worse conditions, with far less certainty, on a thin branch in the cold with nothing underneath it but air. It is not brave. It is simply built to let go. We are built that way too, and we have argued ourselves out of it. Somewhere along the line we decided that the responsible response to uncertainty is vigilance. And we have been running that program for so long that it feels like character rather than habit. The bird has no such theory. It just goes under. Notice that Jesus did not tell the crowd to be more like the birds in their working. He said nothing about their labor. He told them to look at how the birds are held, which is a different instruction entirely. Look at how they are held, not look at how they behave. And they are held badly by our standards. Many of them do not survive the winter. He was not promising anyone that nothing would happen. He was pointing at an arrangement much older than anybody's anxiety, in which small, unprepared creatures are fed every day, everywhere, without accounts. That arrangement includes you tonight. It included you last night, when you were also not managing it. It included you during every hour of your childhood, when you had no idea where anything came from. It has never once depended on your understanding of it. You are inside something that feeds things. That is the fact. So put your head under your wing. Let your temperature drop. Let the branch hold whatever weight you have, the way it holds every other sleeping thing on that hillside tonight. There is peace on a bare branch in the cold. That is the whole strange promise. You are held in the open, with no roof and no plan, and you are worth more than they are, and they are being kept. Rest now. And then he says the line about tomorrow. Do not be anxious about tomorrow, he said, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Notice that he does not say there is no trouble. He does not tell them that things will go well, or that their fears are exaggerated, or that faith will protect them from hunger. He acknowledges in the same sentence that each day has trouble in it. He simply says that today's portion is enough for today, and that tomorrow will bring its own, and that carrying both at once is more than a person is built to hold. That is a practical statement about capacity. It is not a promise about outcomes. You have exactly one day's worth of strength in you at any moment. That is how you were made. It is not a flaw in your character that you cannot also carry Thursday. Nobody can carry Thursday. Thursday has not been issued yet. And at this hour, you do not even have a full day to carry. You have a night. That is all that is in front of you right now. Not the meeting, not the appointment, not the conversation you have been rehearsing. Between you and any of those things, there is a whole night, and the only thing the night asks of you is that you be in it. The birds over that hillside are gone now. So is the crowd. So are those particular flowers. And birds are still being fed tonight, everywhere, in the dark, in every country, without a single one of them having made an arrangement. And the hills above that lake will go purple and red again in the spring for nobody in particular. The pattern did not depend on the people who first heard about it. So look up, in your mind, at something that is not working. A bird asleep in a tree with its feet locked around a branch, grass on a hillside, the small unnecessary beauty of things that have no plan and are cared for anyway. You are worth more than they are. He said so, and he said it to frightened people who were right to be frightened. Not because you produce more, not because you are useful, or because you have handled your responsibilities well, or because you have been strong for people who needed you to be strong. You are simply worth more, and it was stated as a fact, without conditions attached to it. You do not have to spin tonight. You do not have to gather into barns. The day's trouble was sufficient for the day, and the day is over, and it took what it was going to take from you, and it is finished now. There is no barn to fill before morning. You are fed, you are clothed, you are held, and you were not the one arranging it. Let the field go dark. There is peace in not preparing. You may rest now. Scripture holds another picture of this. It happens at the end of a very bad day. There was a young man named Jacob, and he was running. He had done something to his brother. The details are old and complicated, and we are not going to walk through them tonight, because it is dark and the details do not help. What matters is that he had taken something that was not his, and his brother had found out, and the house he grew up in was no longer safe for him. So his mother told him to leave, and he left. He went north on foot, alone, toward relatives he had never met in a country he had never seen. He was probably in his 40s by the reckoning of that book, though he had never lived on his own. He had always been the one who stayed near the tents. Now he had nothing. He was walking away from everything he knew. By the end of the first day, he was out in open hill country. There was no village. There was no inn. There was nobody expecting him anywhere, in any direction, on any road. The sun went down, and he stopped where he was. The text says he took one of the stones of that place and put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. That is it. That is the whole description of his accommodation. A stone, the ground, whatever he had on him. It is one of the loneliest sentences in the book, and it is written so flatly that people read past it. There is no complaint in it. He does not say anything. He just picks up a rock, puts it under his head, and lies down in the dirt in the middle of nowhere with everything behind him ruined. Some of you know that exact posture. Not the stone, maybe, but the flatness. The end of a day where something went badly wrong, and there is nothing left to say about it, and you simply get into bed because it is time to get into bed, and there is nothing else to do with the hours. You are not looking for anything. You are just lying down. That is where Jacob was, and that is exactly where the whole thing turned. He dreamed, and in the dream there was a stairway or a ramp set on the earth with its top reaching the sky, and there were messengers going up and down on it. Up and down, continuously, traffic. The picture is not of a door that opens once. It is of a road that has been busy the entire time. Something had been going up and down over that patch of dirt all evening while he was walking toward it, and all night while he slept on it, and it did not begin because he arrived. He simply saw it. For one night he saw it. And he heard something. A voice saying that the ground he was lying on would be his, and that his family would come from him, and that he would be kept wherever he went, and that he would be brought back. Nothing about what he had done, no conditions, no terms. Then he woke up in the dark. And he said the sentence that this whole episode has been circling. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. I did not know it. That is the hinge. Not the Lord came to this place. Not something arrived because I finally reached the bottom. The presence had been in that field before he got there. It was in the dirt and the stones and the cold night air the whole time he was walking toward it, feeling like the most alone person in the world. His not knowing had changed nothing about it. That is worth sitting with for a long moment tonight. There is a difference between absence and unawareness, and almost all of us confuse them, and the confusion causes an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering. You have been in places you experienced as empty. Some season, some room, some stretch of months where you felt like you were entirely on your own and nothing was underneath you. And it is possible, and this story says it is more than possible, that the traffic was going up and down over that place the entire time, and you were simply too tired and too frightened and too far into it to see the stairway. The unawareness was real, the absence was not. And notice where it happened. Not in a temple, not in a good year, not after he had made amends or become a better man, because he had not, and he would not for another 20 years. It happened on the worst night of his life, on a rock in a field. He was not seeking. He had not gone out there to find anything. He had gone out there because he could not stay home, and he lay down because it was dark, and the only reason he was on that ground at all was that his feet had stopped moving. That is where it came, where he collapsed. Then he got up in the morning and took the stone he had used as a pillow and stood it upright and poured oil on it and named the place. The word he gave it means house of God. He named a patch of empty ground a house. There was still no building there. There was still no village, and he was still running, and the situation he was in had not improved by 1 degree. What had changed was that he now knew what the ground was, and he would carry that for the rest of a long and complicated life. The stone stayed a stone. It was just a marked one now. Your bed tonight is that kind of ground. It is ordinary, and it is where your feet stopped, and it is a house. You do not have to feel anything about that. Jacob felt nothing for the first several hours. He was asleep for the whole revelation, which is worth remembering when people talk about the spiritual life as though it were something you do with effort and attention. He received the entire thing unconscious. Whatever is going up and down over your house at this hour is not waiting for you to be awake and receptive. It is not waiting for you to have the right posture, or the right words, or a settled mind, or a clean conscience about the day you just had. It has been in traffic all evening. It will be in traffic all night. So you may put your head on whatever you have. It does not have to be soft. Jacob's was a rock, and it was enough, and he called the place a house of God afterward, not before, because you almost always find out afterward. There is peace on that ground. It was there before he lay down. You are held in a field with nothing in it. You are held on the worst night as much as on the best one, and the not knowing does not make it less true. Surely something is in this place. Rest now, and find out in the morning. There is a story sometimes told about a farmhouse and a storm, and a girl who was 8 years old. She was staying with her grandmother that year. Her mother was ill, in a city some distance away, and the arrangement was supposed to be temporary, and had already lasted through a winter and most of a spring. The house was old and low and sat on the edge of a field. The girl had learned the sounds of it. She knew the sound the back door made in wind, and the particular knock of a shutter that had never been fixed properly, and the noise the chimney made when the air was coming from the north. She knew all of them, and she was still afraid of the storms. They came through that valley in the late spring, big ones, moving fast, with thunder that arrived in the floorboards before it arrived in the ears, and the girl would lie in the small room upstairs and go rigid and count. She counted between the light and the sound. She had been told that this told you how far away it was. It did not comfort her. It gave her something to do, which is not the same thing. She would count and get a smaller number, and then a smaller number, and the smaller numbers made everything worse, and then a big one would come directly overhead, and she would stop counting and just lie there with her hands flat on the mattress. One night in April, there was a very large one. It went on for 2 hours. The rain came sideways, and the whole house made noises it did not usually make. And at some point, the girl came down the stairs in the dark and stood at the door of the front room because she could see a lamp was still lit in there. Her grandmother was sitting up in a chair with a blanket over her knees. She was not reading. She was not doing anything. The girl said, "Is it going to take the roof?" And the grandmother said, "No." She did not say it warmly. She said it the way you say a fact you have said before. And she moved the blanket, and the girl got in under it and sat sideways against her, and they looked at the window together for a while. The rain went across the glass in sheets. After a bit, the girl said, "How do you know?" And the grandmother said, "Because your great-grandfather put that roof on in 1911, and it has been through worse than this, and I have watched it hold every time." She said, "I have been in this house for 60 years. It held." The girl said, "But what if this one is worse?" And the grandmother said, "Then I will hear it, and I will get you, and we will go down to the cellar." She said, "That is why I am sitting up." She said it plainly, the way you would explain any chore. Then she said the thing the girl kept. She said, "You do not have to sit up with me. That is my job tonight, and I am doing it, and you can go to sleep." The girl said she was not tired. The grandmother said that was fine, and she could stay, and she put her arm around her and did not say anything else, and they sat there and watched the rain go across the window. The girl was asleep in about 10 minutes. She did not remember falling asleep. She remembered waking up in her own bed the next morning, with the sun out and the field green and wet and steaming a little, and one branch down in the yard, and the roof exactly where it had been. She was 8. She did not think much about it that day. She thought about it for the rest of her life, though. She was 70 when she told somebody this story, and she told it because she had spent much of her life anxious and had found only one thing that reliably worked, and it was not a technique. It was the memory of being told, "That is my job tonight, and you can go to sleep." What the grandmother did in that chair was not magic, and it was not even particularly comforting to describe. She did not promise that nothing bad could happen. she said. "If it does, I will hear it, and I will come and get you." That is the actual shape of safety. It has never been the absence of storms. Nobody has ever been made safe by the guarantee that nothing will go wrong, because that guarantee cannot be given to anyone, and children can tell when an adult is giving it falsely. What can be given is presence and attention and a plan, and the sentence, "You do not have to be the one watching." The girl did not sleep because the storm stopped. The storm did not stop. She slept because the watching had been transferred to somebody else, and she believed it, and her body let go of a job it had been doing badly for 2 hours. That is the whole mechanism, and it is the same one that was in the boat. The men who woke Jesus were not asking for information. They were asking, "Do you not care?" What they needed was not weather. It was to know that somebody else was awake in the house. And somebody was. He was in the boat with them the whole time. Consider what you have been sitting up for tonight. Some of you have been keeping watch over something for months, and there is no one you have handed it to, and you have not slept properly in a long time because of it. You are the grandmother in the chair. Nobody relieved you. Hear this then, in the plainest way it can be said. The watch is not yours alone. There is something older than the house, and it has been through worse than this, and it has held every time, and it is holding now while you lie there, listening to the shutter. That is not a promise about the branch in the yard. Branches come down. It is a promise that you will not be the only one awake, and that if something needs to be heard in the night, it will be heard, and you do not have to be the one hearing it. So get under the blanket. Let the rain go sideways across the window. The roof was put on a long time ago by people you never met, and it has held through storms you never knew about, and it is holding right now over your head while you read nothing and do nothing and simply lie there. You may go to sleep. That is somebody else's job tonight. There is peace under an old roof. You are held. Rest now. Scripture holds another picture of this, and it is very short. It is a song about building and guarding. It begins with 2 sentences about work that fails. Unless the Lord builds the house, it says, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. Then it says something about bread. It is in vain that you rise early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, and then the line that has kept people company for 3,000 years, for he gives to his beloved sleep. That is nearly the whole song. It is 6 verses. Most of it is these 3 ideas. Let us take them slowly, because each one is doing something. The first picture is a house going up, stone on stone, in the sun, with men on scaffolding and a foreman shouting, and the whole ordinary noise of construction. The song does not say the building is bad. It does not say, do not build. It says something stranger. It says the labor is in vain if it is only labor. Not wasted in the sense of useless, wasted in the sense of empty. The wall goes up either way. The wall does not know the difference. What the song is describing is the interior condition of the man carrying the stones, and whether he believes the whole thing rests on his arms. If it does, he will never stop. That is the trap. Because a man who believes the house depends entirely on him cannot go home at night. There is always another course of stone. There is always more light to use. The finishing of it recedes ahead of him at exactly the speed he approaches it. Then the second picture, and this one is for tonight. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. Picture the man on the wall. It is a real job in that world, and a common one. He walks the top of the wall in the dark with a spear and a horn, and he looks out at the country, and he does that from sundown until the light comes. He is not asleep. That is his whole function. And the song does not say the watchman is unnecessary. Cities had walls, and walls had men on them, and the song is not arguing for abandoning the post. It says something more subtle and more freeing than that. It says the man on the wall is not the thing keeping the city. Something else is watching. The watchman is one small part of an arrangement that is much larger than him, and the arrangement does not stand or fall on his eyes. His work is real. His work is not load-bearing in the way he thinks it is. That distinction is everything for a person who cannot sleep. Because most people who lie awake are not lazy people avoiding rest. They are watchmen. They are on a wall, looking out at something, because they believe that if they stop looking, the thing will come. You know your wall. You have been walking it for a while. And the song is not telling you that there is nothing out there. It does not say the country beyond the wall is empty. It says the watching is being done by someone else as well, and has been all along, and your eyes are not the last line of anything. Then the bread. It is in vain that you rise early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil. The phrase in the old languages is something like the bread of sorrows or the bread of painful labor. It is food eaten standing up quickly because there is no time. Almost everyone has eaten that bread. Many of you ate it today. It is not the food. It is the way it is eaten. It is a whole life lived at that tempo, up before light, down after dark, with the meals happening somewhere in the middle as refueling rather than as anything human. The song says that this is empty too, not wrong, empty. And then, right at the end, without any transition, it says the thing everyone remembers, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Sit with the grammar of that. Sleep is described as a gift, not as a reward, and not as an achievement, and not as the result of good habits or a settled conscience. It is something given from outside to people who are loved. You cannot manufacture it. That is the honest experience of every person who has tried. Anyone who has lain awake knows that sleep is the one thing you cannot get by trying harder. Effort is precisely what prevents it. It arrives when you stop reaching for it, from somewhere that is not you, in a moment you never notice. That is why the song calls it a gift. It behaves like one. And the people it is given to are not described as the diligent, or the worthy, or the ones who finished. They are described as beloved. That is the only qualification named. You are in that category tonight, exactly as you are. Not because you built enough of the house today, not because you kept a good watch, not because you ate your bread sitting down like a civilized person, which most of you did not. You are beloved, and sleep is given to the beloved, and that is the whole mechanism. There is one more thing worth noticing in this small song. It is the order of it. It does not say, stop working, and then you will rest. It does not scold the builder or the watchman at all. It simply says the house is being built by someone else too. That is not permission to be careless. It is permission to be finished for the day. The wall you laid today is real. The watch you kept today counted. And now the night has come, and there is a watch that does not have a shift change, and it has the city. Come down off the wall. The gate is not yours to hold. Notice how tired your eyes are from looking out at the dark country. Notice that nothing has come. Notice that the hours you spent watching last week produced no information you did not already have. The city stands. It was standing before you climbed up there. So let the horn hang on its peg. Let the spear lean against the stone. Let the man who has been walking that wall since sundown sit down with his back against the parapet, and let his head go heavy. He gives to his beloved sleep. He is giving it now. There is peace on the wall when you stop pacing it. You are held by the watch that never sleeps, and you may rest now. The Gospels hold a smaller moment that says the same thing, and it happens in a kitchen doorway. There were two sisters in a village outside the city, and Jesus came to their house. The older one was named Martha. The house seems to have been hers, and she was the one who welcomed him in, and she was clearly the sort of person who makes a household run. Every family has one. Usually nobody thanks her. The younger one was named Mary, and when Jesus sat down, Mary sat down too, on the floor near him, and listened. That is the whole setup. It takes about 2 sentences in the text. Now understand what Martha was doing, because the story is often told in a way that is unfair to her. She was not fussing over nothing. In that culture, a guest arriving meant a genuine obligation, and the obligation fell on the household, and there was real work in it. Water for feet, bread, something cooked, a place made. And there were likely others with him. He rarely traveled alone. So Martha was preparing for a group of people who had walked a long way in a small house with no help, while her sister sat on the floor in the other room. Anyone would be irritated. You would be irritated. And she got more irritated as it went on, the way it goes, and eventually she came to the doorway and said something to the teacher rather than to her sister, which is its own small human detail. Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me. Notice the phrase, do you not care? It is the same phrase the men used in the boat, almost word for word. It is the sentence that comes out of a person who is working very hard and frightened underneath the working, and who has begun to suspect that nobody has noticed. That is what Martha was actually saying. Nobody has noticed. And his answer is one of the gentlest things in the book, and it is almost always read with the wrong tone. People read it as a correction. It is not. Martha, Martha, he said. He said her name twice. That is not how you begin a rebuke. It is how you speak to someone who is far out on a ledge of their own making, and you want them to come back in slowly. You are anxious and troubled about many things, he said. He did not say, you are wrong to be cooking. He did not say the food does not matter, or that hospitality is beneath a spiritual person, or that she should be more like her sister. He named her condition accurately, with sympathy. Anxious and troubled about many things. That is a diagnosis, not a verdict. He is saying, look at how many things you are carrying at once, and look at what it is doing to you. There are 12 concerns in your hands, and you are trying to hold them all at the same height. Then he says the line, one thing is necessary. 1, not 12. And Mary has chosen the good portion, he said, and it will not be taken from her. Now here is what that means practically, and it is not a recommendation to stop cooking. Somebody made the food that day. The story does not end with everyone going hungry while 2 women sit on a floor. What was taken away from Martha was not her work, it was the many. He was offering her a reduction, not a reassignment. She could go back to the same kitchen and do the same tasks with 1 thing in her hands instead of 12. and it would be a completely different afternoon, and the bread would still get made. The trouble was never the serving, it was the many. And the many is what most of you brought to bed tonight. Not one large thing, 12 medium ones, none of which can be finished at this hour, all of which are somehow being held at once. You are anxious and troubled about many things, he said it kindly. He is not asking you to solve them. He is not asking you to rank them, or make a plan for them, or decide which one is the real one underneath the others. That is more work, and there is no more work available tonight. He is saying that one thing is enough for now. And at this hour, in the dark, with nothing open and nobody to call, the one thing is not a task at all. It is the fact that you are in a room and you are not alone in it, and that the many will still be there tomorrow and will be handled one at a time, the way things actually get handled. There is a small thing in that scene that is easy to pass over. He was in the house. That is the whole occasion for the story. Martha was working in a house that already contained the thing she was working for. She was preparing a welcome for someone who had already been welcomed, and the running back and forth was happening around a guest who was, at that moment, simply sitting down. He was not waiting to be impressed. He had arrived. That is the shape of most of our anxious effort. We are getting ready for something that is already in the room, and the getting ready is what keeps us from noticing that it came in an hour ago and sat down. Notice that nobody had to be fetched. He did not have to be earned into that house, or persuaded, or made comfortable enough to stay. He came in and sat, and the entire question of the afternoon was whether anyone in the building was going to stop moving long enough to be with him. One of them did. She did it by sitting down. You may do the same tonight, and it costs nothing, and it requires no preparation at all. There is nothing left to make ready. The house is as ready as it is going to be, and the day's work has been done to whatever standard it was done to, and none of that is the point anymore. Stop moving. That is the whole of it. There is peace in a room you have stopped preparing. You are held in it exactly as it is, unfinished, with dishes in the sink. Mary was not doing anything impressive. She was sitting on the floor. That is worth saying clearly, because people turn her into a symbol of piety, and she was not. She was a woman who sat down. She did not have a technique. She had simply stopped moving in the presence of something worth staying near. And he said it would not be taken from her. That phrase has a kindness in it that is easy to miss. Not she has earned it. Not she is the better sister. It will not be taken from her. It is hers to keep, and nobody is going to come and remove it, and she does not have to defend it. The same holds for the next 8 hours of your life. They will not be taken from you. The night is yours. Nothing is going to come and repossess it, because you did not do enough with your day, and you do not have to justify lying down. You may put 11 of the 12 things down on the floor. Not permanently, just for tonight. They will be exactly where you left them in the same condition, and you will pick them up in the morning with more strength than you have right now. One thing is necessary. Tonight it is sleep. Notice how much of the trouble was in the carrying and not in the things. Notice that Martha's kitchen was not the problem. Notice that he called her by name twice before he said anything else at all. You have been called by name too. That is the whole of it. There is peace on the floor of that house. Sit down in it. You are held here as much as you were held in the kitchen. Rest now. This brings us to something else the old teachers used to say. and it is the last story tonight. There was a woman in England about 700 years ago who lived in a single room attached to the side of a church. That was a recognized way of life then. A person could withdraw into one room permanently, with a window into the church on one side and a window onto the street on the other. Food came through the street window, so did conversation. She lived like that for decades. We do not know her name. She is called Julian, after the church her room was built onto, because that is all anyone recorded. She wrote a book, and it is the first book in the English language we know to have been written by a woman. And she wrote it slowly over about 20 years. The book came out of a few hours when she was very ill. She was around 30. She got sick, badly enough that a priest was called, and she was given the last rites, and everyone in the room expected her to die that week. And during those hours, she experienced a series of visions, 16 of them, over the course of about a day. Then she recovered, and she spent the next 20 years thinking about what she had seen. That detail matters more than the visions. She did not write it down immediately. She lived with it. She turned it over in a small room for 2 decades before she felt she understood the shortest and most famous part of it. The world she lived in was not a gentle one. The plague came through her city more than once during her lifetime. It is likely that she watched a large portion of the people she knew die within a few years. There was war, there was famine. Historians estimate that England lost something close to half its population in the decades around her life. She was not writing from a comfortable place. That is the whole point. And what she wrote out of that is a sentence that has been carried by people in terrible circumstances ever since. It is not clever. It is not complicated. She says that she was shown, and that the words given to her were these: "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." 3 times. She repeats it 3 times. Now, she was not naive, and it is important to say that clearly. She asked the obvious question herself in the book directly. She wanted to know about the suffering. She had seen too much of it to accept a soft answer, and she says so. And she does not report getting an explanation. That is unusual, and it is honest. She says she was not shown why. She says the answer to that was kept, and that she was told, in effect, that she would see it later, and that she should not need it now. What she was given instead was a small thing in her hand. In one of the visions, she saw something the size of a hazelnut lying in her palm, round and ordinary, and she says she wondered what it was, and she understood that it was everything that is made. The whole world, hazelnut-sized in a hand. And she says she wondered how it could last, because it seemed so small that it might simply fall into nothing. And the answer she reports is one line: it lasts, and it always will, because God loves it. That is the whole architecture. It is held because it is loved. Not because it is strong, not because it is well managed, or because the people in it have behaved, or because the arrangements are sound. It is a small round thing in a hand, and the hand is why it continues. She wrote that during a plague. So when she says all shall be well, she is not saying that nothing bad will happen. She had watched a great deal that was not well, and she never pretended otherwise in a single line of that book. She is saying something about the end of the story, not about the middle of it. And she is very careful about the middle. There is a passage where she says that we will have trouble, and be shaken, and be distressed, but that we will not be overcome. She distinguishes those. Being shaken is not the same as being overcome. She said the first would happen. She said the second would not. That is a promise a person can actually use at 2 in the morning. Because most of what wakes people up is not the fear of being shaken. Most of us have been shaken already and survived it. The fear is of being overcome. It is the fear that this time the thing will go all the way down and there will be nothing underneath it. She says there is something underneath it. She says it is love and that it holds. And then there is the ordinary detail of how she lived. 20 years in one room, thinking about this. People came to the street window and asked her things, because she became known for it, and she gave them what she had. She was not in a hurry. She had one thing. There is something worth noticing about the whole shape of her life, which is that she found her sentence in the middle of an illness and then spent 2 decades letting it become true at a deeper level. She did not receive it and move on. She stayed with it. You may stay with it tonight. It is short enough to carry into sleep. All shall be well. Not all is well at this moment in your particular situation. She would never have said that, and it would be a lie, and you would know it was a lie, and it would keep you awake. All shall be. That is a different tense, and it changes everything. It means the story has an ending, and the ending is good, and you are somewhere in the middle of it, where the shape is not visible yet. It means that the part you are in is not the whole. It means that the thing you cannot see the resolution of is not therefore unresolved. She said one more thing that belongs at the end of a night like this. She wrote that he did not say, "You shall not be tempested, you shall not be travailed, you shall not be afflicted." Those are her words in her Old English, and they are careful. He did not promise the absence of any of it. And then she wrote what he did say, which was, "You shall not be overcome." She set those 2 lists side by side deliberately, and she left them there, and she did not try to reconcile them. That is unusual honesty for a book about visions. She knew people would want the first list canceled. She knew that what everyone actually wants is a promise that the storms will not come. And she had watched enough of her city die to know that such a promise cannot be made. So she gave the true one instead. You will not be overcome. Notice the difference between those 2 words, because at this hour it is the whole difference. To be tempested is to be in weather. To be overcome is to go under and not come back up. You have been in weather. You have not gone under. That is not luck, and it is not toughness. It is what she saw. There is something at the bottom of it that does not let go, and it has been holding through every storm you have ever been in, including the ones you were sure would finish you. You are still here. That is the evidence. And she would say, gently, that the storm you are in tonight is in the first list, not the second. It is weather. It is real, and it is heavy, and it is not the end of you, and there is a hand under the whole of it. The hazelnut has not fallen. It has never fallen. So let the last thing you carry down be the smaller promise, because the smaller promise is the true one, and true things hold weight in a way that comforting ones do not. You will be tempested. You will not be overcome. There is peace in a sentence that does not lie to you. Rest in it. You are held by something that has already outlasted everything you are afraid of. And in the meantime, the hazelnut is in the hand. Everything that is made, including your life, including the person you are worried about, including the situation that has no visible path through it, is small and round and lying in a palm, and it lasts because it is loved. You do not have to hold it. You have never been the hand. So let the middle of the story be the middle of the story. You are not required to see the end from here. Nobody in the whole long line of people who have carried this sentence could see the end from where they were standing either. You will be shaken. You will not be overcome. Notice how much lighter that is than what you have been trying to believe. You do not have to be certain everything will work out in the way you want. You only have to let the thing in the hand stay in the hand. There is peace in a hazelnut. That is a strange sentence, and it is true. She lived in one room for 20 years with almost nothing, in a century that took nearly everything, and she came out of it saying that the ground of it all was love, and that love was strong enough to keep a world the size of a nut from falling. That is what is underneath your bed tonight. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Let those be the last words you carry down. You are held in the hand. There is peace there. Rest now. You do not need to remember everything you heard tonight. If one moment stayed with you, let that be enough. And if nothing stayed, that is fine too. Some things settle into us without our knowing, and they do their work quietly, long after the words are gone. If you are still with us, thank you for staying. If you have already drifted off, thank you for that too. The whole point of this was that you would not have to hear the end of it. Wherever you are right now, you are welcome here, exactly as you are. Nothing had to be finished, and nothing had to be fixed, and the boat held the whole time. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Chapel.